everybody. We're talking about the shoulder girdle, the arm, reach and power. And we're going to start with a PowerPoint because I want to explain why the shoulder and the arm all... Is this coming up okay, Marnie?
Yeah, I'm just grabbing it up on my phone now. Give me 2 minutes.
So the PowerPoint's coming through okay?
Yeah.
Okie doke. So a lot of people, where this has come from is that people complain that when they are wearing spinal jackets, they can't reach as far. And actually, this is not reach when you're wearing a spinal jacket. This is lean. What you cannot do is you cannot lean as far. Reach is about the arm and the shoulder girdle. So like we have done in the last few webinars, we are starting with an anatomy lesson, and that might sound a bit boring, but if you understand what's going on and why it's going on, this is not just about jackets, this is about spinal surgery as well. If you've got a rod in your spine, you need to know about this, because ultimately we can complain that we can't reach, or we can do something about it. So the shoulder joint, again, can't be considered in isolation. You have to think about the whole shoulder girdle, and this is what people forget. And obviously the shoulder involves the arm and the thoracic spine. So if you've got scoliosis, even if you don't wear a jacket or you haven't had spinal surgery, it is going to affect what happens to your arm and your shoulder girdle. So this is your shoulder joint. This is the top of your arm, your humerus. And it fits loosely, and it is loosely. It's not like the hip, although it's a ball and socket. The socket is not deep like the hip joint. It's almost flat. So you can see from this that the joint is not held, the bone's not held into the joint. It is literally suspended with muscles, ligaments, tendons, and what they call the joint capsule, which is a tough, or should be tough, fibrous capsule around the whole lot. And if you dislocate, basically it means that you've stretched the capsule or you've torn the capsule and your arm has popped out somewhere. So for those of you who dislocate, doesn't mean to say you have torn the capsule. You will know if you've torn the capsule because your arm won't go back, but basically it's a very loose joint. It has to be loose to be mobile, but it is suspended. And it's like this in humans because we don't really weight bear on our arms. It doesn't have to be stable, it has to be mobile. But this is the shoulder joint here, and the arm would be hanging down here. This is connected at the back to the shoulder blade here. And the shoulder blade has got this long bony point that comes round the front here, which attaches to your clavicle, your collarbone. So it's all linked, and your collarbone then connects to your breastbone, your sternum, to which your ribs are all attached. So it's all linked. You cannot think about your arm, your shoulder, your reach without thinking about what's going on in this whole area, and particularly here. And as soon as that spine starts to curve, it's going to have a knock-on effect on that shoulder blade. Obviously, there are a lot of muscles around here, under the shoulder blade, on top of this spine, underneath it, hanging it on, round the front. And obviously you've got your arms, and this is what it looks like. Oh, let's go back. I've got something right in the middle of my screen here. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so this is what it looks like without your thoracic spine, without your ribs, but you cannot separate what's happening in your collarbone, your shoulder blade, which comes right over the top of your shoulder, and your arm. With it all goes together. Like the hip and the pelvis, it all goes together. And these are some of the big muscles that string it all together. Now, this one is one of the biggest. And this trapezius muscle is the one that so many of you use to pull your shoulder blades up to your ears to help stabilize your head. And this is one of the problems of the shoulder, that if you are leaning onto one shoulder, or if you are pulling your shoulder blade up, that affect your arm and your reach. The big chunky muscle over the top of your shoulder, or should be big and chunky, this one here, is deltoid. That lifts your arm out to the side, but there are many movements and many things going on that stabilize your arm and move it and allow you to reach. Now, as you can see down the back of your spine, there's all sorts of muscles. There's these muscles at the side of your trunk, which help you to lean down. There's pectoralis major, those big ones that all the bodybuilders have, that really weight bear your arms, help you stabilize from the front. So there's a lot going on. These are the muscles at the top of the arm. This is the front, your biceps, which is here. These are all the ones between your ribs, serratus anterior, lots of muscles. Don't worry about the names, but this is important. This is your triceps muscle. And your triceps muscle is the one at the back of your upper arm, the one that straightens your elbow. But more importantly, it also attaches up at your shoulder blade, and it pulls your arm in and helps you stabilize your shoulder. And that muscle is often very weak. That's the one, if you're lying down and you're trying to reach your hand upwards, doesn't straighten your arm. So these are your basic muscles for your shoulder. You have flexion, which is lifting your arm up in the air, extension, lifting it out back behind you, which so many people forget about, because when you're sitting in a wheelchair, you don't have the space to actually do that when you're sitting down a lot of the time. So people forget about extension, forget that it's an important movement and stops some of the kyphotic posture by extending. Abduction is taking it out to the side, and adduction is bringing it back. And then we have rotation, which are equally important movements to allow you to reach. If you can't take your arm out that way, you can only take it out sideways. Again, it limits your reach. And then your shoulder blades do things as well. They go up towards your ears, they go down towards your pelvis, they come in towards each other so that they're trying to touch each other. They spread apart as though you're trying to bring your shoulders forwards. They rotate outwards when you're lifting your arm up and come back to their neutral position when your arms come down again. So your shoulder blades are very mobile, and so they should be. They're not stuck. And this is what it looks like when you pull them up and your neck sort of disappears. And this is what a lot of children and adults do to stabilize their head. When their neck is weak, they pull their shoulders up so that the trapezius muscle is helping to stabilize the head. And this is what it looks like from the front. This is the sort of thing that many people do. They pull their shoulder blades up because it helps to stabilize the neck, helps to support the head. Once your shoulder blades are up there, your shoulder joint and your arm is limited. It restricts the movement of your arm. So to get your full reach, your shoulder blades have got to be down. Now this is your shoulder blade, and you can see in scoliosis that where the curve goes is where your shoulder blade sticks out. And as you have weakness in the muscles around your shoulder, then you have what we call a winging scapula, where it sticks out instead of lying flat to your body. And we always bend the children forwards when we're assessing their spine to see whether there is what we call a hump here compared to this one, which will show you the asymmetry, rotation of the ribs, and the scoliosis and how it's affecting the shoulder blades. And you can see as you go forwards, this hump as it appears up here. And if we take that away, you can again see the effect of scoliosis, taking one shoulder up and pushing one shoulder blade out. So obviously it's going to affect your arms and your reach. And people complain about jackets, and jackets get in the way, and jackets are a problem. Well, think about how much of a problem scoliosis is and how much of a problem spinal rods are. Because if you can't do something in a jacket, you're certainly not going to do it in a spinal rod. Okay, so when we think of sitting and reach, we have to think of posture. If you're sitting in this sort of posture or this sort of posture or this sort of posture, your reach is going to be limited anyway. So poor sitting is a big factor in reach. And you can see in this picture how when you're sitting up straight, this is one of the problems that everybody complains about. Because what happens is when you're sitting curved, this is how close your hands are to your mouth or your head. But when you're sitting up straight, you can see there's a big difference here. So ultimately, the big problem is not your reach. It's distances that you want to reach that become the problem. And as I say, we need to separate the idea of leaning, moving sideways, forwards, backwards from reach. When you can lean, yes, your arms will go further. But if you're weak around the shoulder, you still can't get that far. Okay, so we're going to stop sharing for a minute and go through that again. So what we want to do is separate the idea of reach and lean, and that's why you will see that it's no good saying a jacket stops me reaching. A jacket doesn't stop you reaching. A jacket stops you leaning. That's what it does. But then spinal surgery is going to do the same thing. Your spine moves obviously in several different ways. You can bend forwards. When you bend forwards, your arms are going to go forwards with you. You can bend upwards and stick your arms up in the air. And in fact, you can put your arms there and not move them at all, and you can reach without moving your arms at all. But that's not actually reaching, that is leaning. Your arms aren't moving, so you're not reaching, you're lifting your arms and you're bending your body. Or twisting, which is what your thoracic spine does best. Bending is very much your lumbar spine, the bit between your ribs and your pelvis, and twisting is your thoracic spine. But then you can lean. But as I say, this is not about reaching, this is about leaning. So that a jacket will stop you leaning, there is no doubt about it. But if you can use your arms better, you will have better reach. Now we know when you are sitting, if you are sitting upright, the distance up to your mouth is greater than when you are forward. So if your head is down here, obviously it's easier to get to your mouth. So if you're here leaning forwards, you're trying to scratch your ears, get your hair, whatever, pick your nose, that is easier than if it's up here straight and better. And there are articles. Now, I went to a conference many years ago in Portugal, and unfortunately this article was in Portuguese. But this is a long time ago. I mean, we're talking probably 20 years ago, and a Portuguese OT had done a study of reach for children in and out of jackets. And she had a frame with little bricks that you could put in, and she saw just how high the children could reach up this frame in the jacket and out of the jacket. And they seem to be better out of the jacket. But there are parents who say that actually having a jacket makes the child more stable and gives them better reach. Is this better reach or is it better lean? What we have to think of is the power around the shoulders. What we also have to think of is going back to normal development. In normal development, 2/3 of children will crawl. Up to 1/3 of children never crawl. So what happens when you crawl is that you weight bear on your arms. This is something that many children with SMA never really do. They may go on do tummy time, go over a ball, go over a peanut, but you don't really weight bear on your arms. Unless you crawl, you are not doing a lot of weight bearing on your arms. And what's the effect of crawling? It strengthens and stabilizes the shoulders. And one of the things about crawling is it teaches you to lean on your arms and land on your arms. And we know when the children fall, when they're sitting, and they're sitting beautifully, sitting for ages, and they go, yeah, timber, they don't tend to put their arm out to save themselves, not because they don't have that reflex reaction, but because when they get there, it just crumbles underneath them anyway. And so they just go splat sideways or backwards or forwards. And that is because we do not have the shoulder and arm stability to land or stabilize ourselves going sideways on our arms. And this is one of the problems with the weakness around the arms, with not crawling, with having to use as much of our power as possible to stabilize our head. And very often to stabilize our head, as I say, we bring our shoulders up or one shoulder up to help stabilize. Stop it, Marnie. Help stabilize, because we know that adults do it as well. Help stabilize. And once your shoulder is up, your arm is limited. Now, parents and carers, you can try it yourself. Stick your shoulders up there and try and reach upwards, and it's almost impossible with your shoulder girdle stuck up there. You can't reach upwards. You can't reach anywhere with your shoulders stuck there. It's very hard to actually do anything. You feel a bit like robotic. So you need to think where we are going with this whole complaint of I cannot reach. Basically, what we are saying is the shoulder girdle is weak. Most of the time, the problem is the shoulder girdle is weak because it's not the reach that's the problem, as I say, with the jacket or the rods or just with the scoliosis, it's the lean. It's the ability to lean. And we know that most children with SMA are very mobile little creatures and they love moving around. And one of the things that's such a waste of time is thoracic pads, because you put thoracic pads in their buggy or their wheelchair, and the first thing they'll do is sit forward of them and wriggle out of them. So that they don't like to be held, they don't like to be restricted. Why? Because they can't lift their arms effectively, so it restricts what they're doing. So they already know from tiny that they're limited in their arm movement, and their trunk is needed to get them to move about. So what we need to do is think about how we can improve the shoulder girdle and the shoulders to improve that reach. Now with Spinraza, nusinersen, whatever you want to call it, Risdiplam, Zolgensma, we have to say, let's get real, people. The obsession is what you're doing with your legs. I have found the adults a lot more realistic than a lot of the parents, and they want to get arm function. Parents are obsessed with walking, with inner walk machines, with moving around on 2 feet, and tend to forget the arms and the shoulders. All they worry about is what happens when you stick a jacket on, not what arm function is about. Now, irrespective of what we want from these treatments, unless you are pre-symptomatic or treated very young, you are not going to suddenly be a type 1 who gets up and walks. You are not going to be a type 2 who gets up and walks. It will do great things, but it won't do miracles. And let's be realistic. Let's concentrate on those functional activities that are going to make life better in the long term, not just in the now, not just on an inner walk, not just in a walking frame. Why are we so obsessed with legs in little ones and totally forget arms? No sugar. Okay, that's my cuppa coming. So we need to think what we can do. Let's stop there for questions before we go on to look at what we can do.
Okay, we've had a few questions. Can I start with a question that
Yes.
is, can core strength then affect reach? Because if you can't lift your arm up to reach for something without you falling, because you use your arm to sit yourself up, does your core strength affect your reach as well?
Basically, what you're saying is you use your arms to prop.
Yeah.
And so if you stop propping, you'll go splat. In effect, your trunk strength, it's not just about core, it's front and back. People tend to think of core as what goes on in the front. It's front and back, so it's trunk extension. It's that trunk stability. If you cannot sit independently, yes, there is that possibility that you are overusing. It's no different from doing this. It's when you are leaning, when you are using one hand and stabilizing with the other hand. It's one of the things that a lot of the children do when they're sitting on the floor, on a plinth, on a chair, is when they're sitting with their legs out, is that they'll have a hand down and a hand up. And this causes asymmetry by itself. And the same can happen when you're at a desk. If you're leaning constantly over here, writing or drawing or whatever you're doing, which is why we like periods of writing and periods of keyboard, because you're using both sides and you're not leaning. But if you're leaning to the point where you need a hand to stabilize you, because your core, your trunk, your stability, it goes all the way down to your pelvis. If you are unstable, maybe then a jacket is the answer. Not as an adult, I accept, because there is no value in sticking a jacket on an adult with a fused spine. And when I say fused, I mean once you've stopped growing, your spine stops changing. Your posture may not, but your actual spine stops changing when you stop growing, and your spine naturally fuses, which is why if you manage to get to around 15, 16 years old and you haven't had spinal surgery, the possibility is you will never have it. But that we know is a rarity among most SMAs.
Okay. We've got quite a few questions come through
Fine.
about spinal jacket. Does a spinal jacket make you weaker?
No. The theory being that if you are wearing it now, when I say it doesn't make you weaker, you've got to be pretty weak to need a spinal jacket. If you're not weak and you're not asymmetrical, you probably won't need a spinal jacket. The spinal jacket does three things. It helps you learn to sit up by stabilizing your trunk so you can learn to control your head better. And that's why we use it in some of the little ones that do not have scoliosis. It's not to control their spine, it's to give the head a stable base. If you are wobbling around all over, it's much harder when you're having difficulty controlling your head on a unstable base. If you're on a wobble board, you're unbalanced. And this is what it's like for some of these children. Their spine's wobbly, it's very floppy. So how can you control your head on a floppy base? So you may wear it for that. You may wear it just to help you sit up straight, because if you're very kyphotic and squished, then you need it to help you breathe better, to help your digestion better, to help get you up. And the third reason, obviously, is to control asymmetry. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have a raging scoliosis, but if you tend to sit to one side quite a lot of the time, or you always flop to the same side when you're tired, that is control. So does it make you weaker? Does it stop you using your muscles? Well, one of the problems is, are you using your muscles anyway? Aren't they weak? Isn't that why we need a spinal jacket? Because our spine is weak. Now, we do not believe in 24-hour, 23-hour jackets at Great Ormond Street. We never did when we were at Hammersmith. We say around 8 hours a day, 8 to 10 hours a day, and at your floppiest. And what we find a lot of parents do, so they put it on in the morning because it's convenient when you're getting dressed to shove it on, and then you tell school to take it off at lunchtime, and then we're tired in the afternoon. Or you wear it all day at school, you come home in the evening, you're absolutely whacked, you take the jacket off and split, you're off to one side. If you are wearing it 23 hours a day, will you get weaker? Well, yes, you're not exercising, so we would never say to wear it for 23 hours a day. It has to come off for exercise. It has to come off for activity. It has to come off for stretching. You cannot stretch properly, be it your shoulder girdle, your pelvis, with a spinal jacket on. So your jacket should always come off for activity, for exercise, and for stretching. But whether it makes you weaker, there is no proof. But generally you are pretty weak to start with. And the whole problem is you do not have the power to hold your own trunk up. Now we know from what is now 2, 3, 4 years of nusinersen that it does not prevent scoliosis, even in the strongest of the type 1s. So that we've had children on it for 3 and 4 years and they are still getting scoliosis. So the strength you are getting from these drugs is not enough to keep you symmetrical. It's not enough to keep your spinal muscles working equally on both sides. It's not enough to help you grow straight. So in that respect, it's not stopping you working your muscles. It's trying to get your muscles to work symmetrically in the right direction. It's the same with CAFOs. CAFOs do not stop you using your legs. It's just trying to keep them straight while you're using them.
You know, just going back to what you just said about scoliosis and SPINMAs are not stopping it. Could that also be to do with various other things like seating and things like that? Because I know like some able-bodied people who work long office hours and are in really bad seats end up with scoliosis. So is there multiple things?
It's you know, I've got a scoliosis, but it's minimal. And when I was at college, my lecturer, who happened to be visually impaired, felt my spine and said, "You're a racket player." And as it happened, I played a lot of badminton. So something as simple as being a regular badminton player, if you're doing a sport where you're always using one side, the classic scoliosis is the violinist. Violinists get scoliosis because they're always, you only ever play one way. You don't tend to swap your violin from side to side. So scoliosis players can, violin players can get scoliosis. I'm not aware of office workers getting scoliosis because office workers tend to be tend to use a lot of keyboards. They may get kyphosis, they may get a lot of back problems, but it's unlikely they'd get scoliosis. And remember again, once your spine, once you stopped growing, you're not necessarily going to change your spine. So getting a scoliosis when you're older, it's very much what you do as a teenager. So I played badminton from 13, 14, quite regularly, 3-4 times a week. And therefore, I did tend, the muscles that were much stronger on that side did tend to pull me around to that side. And as I say, violin players who play from very young can get scoliosis, but you won't necessarily get a scoliosis as you get older. You'll get an asymmetrical posture, you'll get neck problems and back problems. Hairdressers, dentists, notorious for back problems. Certainly, there are a lot of things that ergonomically, you know, in theory, every adult, be they wheelchair users or not, should have an office assessment of their desk, their seating space, the height of everything. We had trouble in our office because I was having back problems and they had to lift all the bookshelves higher to get the screens higher on the computers. So to actually make it ergonomically correct, they had to move all the bookshelves up. So there's a lot that needs doing in offices, and hot desking is the worst thing you can actually do from a posture point of view, because no two people are going to have the same needs from a posture point of view. So hot desking is not a brilliant idea. Laptops are bad enough, but tablets and phones are killers. Let's get real, people. They are not good for you.
Okay.
Sorry. And that goes for able-bodied as well. We've seen an incredible number of teenagers with neck and back problems from this.
Yeah, you sit like this.
Yep. Yep. Right. So,
My carer's just said she's just been sat like that and she's now got neck ache.
It really is a problem, and we have a generation coming who are going to have, and the other thing that's very interesting that you don't know, but when I was a baby, all those multi-million years ago, and everybody over 30, we lay flat in our prams. We did not have buggies that sat us up the whole time. We were flat till we could sit independently. And I think that we are really, I'm not going to be around, and I am not an adult back physiotherapist or neck physiotherapist. But somebody's in line for a big payout because there's going to be lots and lots of people going to physios, chiropractors and osteopaths in the next 20, 30 years because our posture is dire, seriously bad.
Okay, we've got a question. I don't understand it, but you're a physio, so you will.
Am I not?
Prone on extended arms position is appropriate for children with SMA. What about Bobath conception?
What about Bobath? Bobath's for cerebral palsy. And interesting, you should ask about Bobath, but actually Bobath is sort of not popular at the moment. There are several studies that have sort of, I wouldn't say rubbished Bobath, but have suggested it's not well enough functionally orientated. Bobath, and I met the Bobaths, they weren't the nicest people in the world. However, the Bobath method of therapy is about reducing increased tone or increasing reduced tone. Now, reducing increased tone is irrelevant to SMA in the same way that Botox is, because in SMA you do not have increased tone. Now, what about improving reduced tone? And a lot of people talk about SMA, children with SMA, or even adults having reduced tone. Basically, you have weakness. The weakness is caused by lack of nerve supply or lack of nerve impulses to the muscle. Is not the same as reduced tone. It feels the same. But increasing tone and increasing power are not strictly the same thing. Although we do, when we are trying to improve power, use a lot of the same techniques. And instead of thinking Bobath to increase tone, we tend to think of PNF. I've mentioned PNF before, and PNF is currently the hot favorite of physical instructors. If you go to a gym, all the instructors are now teaching PNF, using PNF techniques. It's the hot thing, it's the in thing, and it's about stabilization. It's about what we call rhythmic stabilization. It's about stability. It's about this idea that I've told you over and over, don't let me push you. So you're stabilizing, you'll learn to stabilize. And this is what we're doing for the shoulders. And a lot of the weight bearing stuff that we do for the little ones is about gaining stability, stability for the neck, stability for the shoulders, for the arm, stability for the trunk. And that's what it's about, is getting stability. And the very best way, I think, having studied lots of different methods of physio, is PNF. And we can do it through play, we can do it through activity.
Okay, great. We've got another one asking, why are some professionals against spinal jackets?
I don't think professionals are against spinal jackets. I think the biggest problem that we have, let's get real, is there is very little evidence that says spinal jackets work. Now, the question then is, what is work? If you think, and I know there are companies out there, private companies, because I've had a battle with one of them, who will tell you that they can cure scoliosis with these amazing scoli braces and all sorts of orthotics that are out there. They can't cure scoliosis in SMA because they're not curing the underlying problem. The underlying problem is weakness, asymmetrical weakness, instability, and ultimately no jacket has ever been suggested, anything that we have ever given out has given more than stability. What it is trying to do is keep you growing as straight as possible for as long as possible to have the best possible surgical outcome from spinal surgery. And that is the point of a jacket. Nobody's saying it's going to stop scoliosis. If they are telling lies, because that is a private company who wants you to buy their jacket. Nothing is going to stop scoliosis. We're trying to keep the spine mobile as possible, stop it getting fixed in a horrible position before surgery. And we're trying to keep it as straight as possible. Because if you go into spinal surgery with a mobile spine, you will come out of spinal surgery with a much better spine than you could have got. So we're trying our very best to grow the kids as straight as possible. Now, the growing rods are doing this for us now, but we know in this country, there have been glitches with the growing rods. There has been 2 problems, COVID and glitches with the rods. I think they're starting them again now, the growing rods. But there's been quite a long time, there's been problems with the growing rods and people were stopping using them. Strangely enough, I heard recently somebody said in the States that they don't start growing rods till 6 or 7 years old, which surprised me because I do know that there are some centers in the States that will start as young as 3. One of the reasons that people weren't starting growing rods as early was because growing rods don't grow so big that they will last you till you stop growing. You can't put a growing rod in at the age of 3 and expect it to keep growing until you're 16 years old. They have about 3 or 4 years growth in them, depending what age they went in, which I'll explain in a second, and how old you were when they start. So one of the things about your growth is it goes in spurts. So we know that there are the growth, there's something called growth velocity, and that's speed of growth. And sometimes you grow slower and sometimes you grow faster. And we know that around puberty is one of the times that you grow the fastest. Somewhere between 9 and 15, you tend to grow the fastest. So that point, everything changes the most. And we know that particularly with SMA3. You don't see it quite so much with the SMA2s and 1s because your spine's already pretty rotten by the age of 9, 10, 11. Whereas in SMA3, it does tend to go off quite dramatically at those ages because being on your feet tends to keep it better. So what we find is that depending on how old you are when it all starts, it will depend on how long you're going to get out of the rods, but it's about 3 or 4 years. But now they can do a second set of growing rods. Initially, you could have 1 set of growing rods and then they had to do what they call a fixed fusion. Now you can have more than 1 set of growing rods. I have not heard of anybody having more than 2 sets. Whether they are doing that anywhere in the world, I don't know. I don't know if it's impossible or whether after 2 sets, they would just fuse you solid anyway. Does that answer the question? I think I got lost there.
Yeah, it does. It answers the question down a bit more, to be fair. So, why don't some leave a hole for breathing?
I think what we have to accept is that not everybody has the same experience of SMA. And not everybody understands that SMA children are diaphragmatic breathers. And therefore, as the diaphragm pushes down to expand the lungs, obviously the tummy has to go somewhere. So if you don't leave a tummy hole, it squashes into the jacket or it squashes down under the jacket, which is where then when the jacket rides up. And it makes it very difficult, not so much to breathe, but to eat. And what these children find is they may be okay until they want a meal. And then they can't cope because on a full tummy and a diaphragm pushing down, the jacket becomes uncomfortable. So that I think the top and bottom really is there's too many companies out there who believe they know enough about SMA and don't make a tummy hole. Now you need a tummy hole for two things. Firstly, to give the tummy room to expand. And we know with some of our little tots, they really do have quite a tummy sticking out of that tummy hole. And that's not a bad thing. It's not going to stop the jacket working. For some strange reason, some maybe orthotists, maybe some people, designers, think that by having this nice big chubby tummy sticking out the front of your jacket, the jacket isn't working, and that's not true. And the other thing, of course, is a lot of our weaker children have gastrostomy, so you need to put somewhere for that as well. So you need a tummy hole for two things, both for gastrostomy and to allow the tummy to expand.
Okay.
But every SMA child with a jacket should have a tummy hole, and an adequately sized tummy hole. We have seen tummy holes that have actually been too big to be supportive, but generally, if they're anything, they're too small.
Okay. Do you encourage wearing a jacket even after having rods?
That's not my decision. That's the spinal surgeon's decision. Some spinal surgeons want children to have them after magic rods, particularly the growing rods, because these are not solid and they're not fixed. Obviously, they have to grow. They're only attached at the top and the bottom. So some spinal surgeons want the children to have jackets, even with the magic rods. Some don't. That is the spinal surgeon's decision, and I would not ever change what the spinal surgeon had said. If they say rods and jacket, particularly growing rods, with a fixed fusion, you should not need a jacket. The only problem we ever get, and we have had it with a few people, when you have worn a jacket for a long time, your tummy gets used to being supported. When you have a rod, your back is nice and supported, but your tummy isn't. And suddenly you've got all this space for your tummy and it just goes bleh, and your tummy muscles have got nowhere to go, nothing holding them up. And we have had a few people after spinal surgery whose tummy muscles have just tried to escape all over the place, and that's quite a weird thing to put up with. And that's easily solved with either an elastic belt initially or just a relatively good tubey grip. Now you could say ski pants or magic pants, but they're horrible to go to the loo in. So generally we would say either an elastic belt or tubey grip to hold those tummy muscles until you get used to the idea of letting them escape. But the jacket has to be the decision of the spinal surgeon.
Yeah. Okay. What can I do to stop my child having one shoulder higher than the other and they've not got any rods?
You can't, because if one shoulder's higher than the other, as I showed you in the picture, that is related to the scoliosis. And what you will find, I'll go back to the pictures in a minute when we talk about what we can do. Basically, one shoulder is higher than the other, generally because the curve is pushing one shoulder up. Now, if they don't wear a jacket, what you may find is that it's worse, because if you're leaning to one side, you will naturally counterbalance with your head, which pulls your shoulder up. So if I tend to lean on my right cheek, don't ask, I'm leaning on my right cheek. I never work out how these things look when you're looking at them, because everything ends up back to front. But I am leaning on my right cheek, my right shoulder gets higher, so I tend to try and counterbalance with my head, and I end up with one shoulder higher. And that can often just be because I'm tipping my upper trunk to counter the fact that I'm sitting more on one cheek than the other. You can sit on the other. It depends on sometimes on whether you have a C-shaped curve or an S-shaped curve as to how it works. It will also be affected by rib rotation, because as you saw, the shoulder blade on the side of the rotation is always going to stick out more. But you can do things. We will look at shoulder girdle stretches to try and help get the shoulders down. But there is no point in bringing the shoulders down if then it affects the arms generally or knocks the head out so that the head is still leaning. So again, we can't take the shoulder in isolation. It's the shoulder is the shoulder joint. Then there's the shoulder girdle, which is very much what's going on at the shoulder blade. and then the thoracic spine is going to have an effect as well. So it all has a knock-on effect. It's not as simple as to say it's one shoulder sticking up.
Okay, I think this is the last question for now. If rods have twisted, would wearing a jacket help in adults?
I don't think so. You may want to wear one for comfort if by twisting the rods your spine has become uncomfortable. It would give you support, but my honest feeling is so should molded seating. If you're really uncomfortable when you're sitting, I am not convinced a spinal jacket would be the answer. I really think really good seating would be your answer. But again, one of the problems that we have with molded seats is they mustn't get in the way of activity. And also, I have to be honest and say, to get a decent seating assessment and molded seating as an adult is not an easy thing to achieve. The other thing people have to accept is if you have molded seating, you will have to sit on your sling all day because they're almost impossible to get a sling under your bum in molded seating. So there's lots of things that you have to consider. But if your spine has twisted and you have twisted your rods, the first thing I would be tempted to do is go back and see a spinal surgeon. Now, I know that many of you who've had spinal surgery in the past would have been seen by a pediatric spinal surgeon rather than an adult spinal surgeon. So you may have to find somebody who will look at adult spines. But you can have your rods removed. It's not common, but it's not unheard of, because once your spine's fused, if your rods are twisting and getting in the way, causing discomfort or even poking your skin, they can be removed. So if you're really having discomfort from previous spinal surgery, my temptation would be to say, go find yourself an adult spinal surgeon and see what they say first before you start trying anything. But I can't see that a jacket would actually help dramatically. I think molded seating or a really good seating system would probably be more comfortable. Is that it for now?
We have had another couple come through if you want.
Okay, let's go.
How far down should the spinal jacket go?
It's hard to say down to the bottom, because it should be down to the bottom. It's basically, let me just see if I have my spinal jacket here. Oh dear, I think I've caused an avalanche somewhere. This is good, isn't it? What you only keep in your front room. This is a spinal jacket. This is probably a 3 or 4 year old spinal jacket. It has a tummy hole. It has a waist. Now this here, if you can see it inside, where it sticks up here, sits on your pelvic bones. So this sits on your pelvis. So you can see this is that level, that's the top of your pelvis. So it almost comes down to a level that would be where the seat is. Not quite, you don't want it on the seat, because the seat's then going to push the jacket up. So when you are sitting in your chair, your wheelchair, your high chair, wherever, you do not want that on the surface, because it will push the jacket upwards. Except we do get some of the littlies jackets, and the very littlies who aren't sitting, we get them extended onto the surface to help sit them. So it stabilizes against the surface, but it should come. So if you're sitting where your body cheeks sit on the seat, you should have a little gap, but it shouldn't be enormous. So this is the top of your pelvis. These are the bones that you can feel just below. If you keep going down from your ribs, you have your waist, and then you have your pelvis. That's where that should sit. Then that should not be touching the seat. It's finger breadth, that's all. Allows you room to lean backwards, certainly gives you room to lean forwards. And at the front, you should be on the thighs, but never ever digging in the thighs at the front. Now, it's really important that you have this sitting on the pelvis, because that is where the stability comes. That holds the pelvis as symmetrical as possible. And then the rest of the work, the 3-point pressure, comes from above. So it's extending you upwards, it's straightening your pelvis, and it's giving you the stability so that if you're curving this way, it will push you back. If you're curving this way, so it would be a slightly different shape if you're an S or a C, but that should hold your pelvis, and try and hold it as straight as possible. And we did show many years ago with a pressure mat. So when you sit on a pressure mat, it gives you a printout of the pressure going through your bum. And you can imagine that the highest pressure is in red and it all spreads out. You get a lovely picture of your bum. And we showed several families that when they were sitting without the jacket, that the pressure was much less equal than when they were sitting in the jacket. And a good jacket should always equalize the pressure as far as possible going through your pelvis and work up from there. Now, one of the important things about a jacket, it shouldn't be too high up under the arms. And one of the complaints is always that you put the jacket on and it rides up. Now, there's two reasons why it rides up. Firstly, it's not put on properly or tied up tight enough. And the second one is the way that you sit the child up. So when you put the jacket on in lying, you have the jacket here, you put the jacket on lying down, and then you sit the child up. And what happens is, if you just sit the child up with straight legs and you lift them up, the tummy sinks and comes out under the jacket and pushes the jacket up. And this often happens after you've been on the toilet and get back in, or you've opened the jacket to eat, or for chest physio or whatever. Tie it back up, don't tie it up tightly, or don't sit the child up properly, and your tummy escapes down the bottom and pushes the jacket up. And that's a very common reason why the jacket rides up. And what's really important, and I know I've had some complaints about my dolly being a bit ugly, but don't be nasty. The important thing is, once the jacket is on, bend the knees up to bring them up to sitting. And that stops the tummy escaping. Make sure the jacket is tied adequately. It should not be too tight if the tummy hole is fine. The child is in line, knees go up. You don't have to have the feet stuck up in the air, but knees, hips bent, and then sit the child up in one piece. And that stops the tummy escaping and the jacket riding up. Now, we do have a few problems with some of the older girls not liking this. And you can have this section elasticated. You can have boob holes cut, but you end up looking like an overgrown Barbie. It would help if I didn't have it upside down. So you can have an elasticated section or a boob section. It's not impossible, but you can have it elasticated. Now, this is fairly flexible. This is a semi-rigid jacket. It's fairly easy to open. There are more rigid ones. One of the things about the jackets that we have made, and I'll have to say John Florence, because it is John Florence, of course, is that they always fasten at the front. I know in idiopathic scoliosis particularly, they often fasten down the back. I have a funny feeling that's to stop the kids opening them, to be honest. But they can fasten down the back, or you can have a two-piece jacket. A two-piece jacket never, ever will fit as closely as a one-piece, but the back opening ones, as long as they have a tummy hole, are fine for SMA. They're just harder to put on, and particularly hard because if you're trying to do it, you often have to do it inside lying to fasten it up. You certainly can't turn them on their front to fasten them up. That is really a horrible position. So generally, all our jackets, I have never seen one that is not front opening. That was something we weren't expecting. Right. Any more questions come through, Marion?
Yeah, we've got a few.
Okay.
Well, one's more of a little statement rather than a question, but I'll read it out anyway. Is my son finds the second skin much more comfortable than the spinal jacket. He prefers to wear that at school, the second skin at school, and when he's wearing the CAFO, he's wearing the spinal jacket.
Yeah, no, we've talked about this a lot in our team as to why children wear jackets and CAFOs together, and we don't know. We're not sure why children are wearing jackets and CAFOs. We know there are a few of them. We don't put jackets and CAFOs together for lots of reasons. The first one is if the jacket comes down far enough and the CAFOs come up high enough, you will get a nice bit of pinched body in between the two. So one of them is too short, be it the CAFOs or the jacket. That's the first thing. So the jacket comes down fairly low, the CAFOs go up fairly high, pinched body. We do not advocate jackets and CAFOs together. We know several centres that do. We're not really sure why. So one of the reasons of going into CAFOs is to work the trunk. And if the jacket is on, you're not working your trunk. So that's one thing. Walking in CAFOs and jacket, we think is generally harder than walking in CAFOs alone, because one of the things that the children have to do is wiggle side to side to get the weight from one leg to the other, because in SMA it's quite exaggerated when you're walking to shift your weight right over one leg to kick the other leg forward. And that is harder because that is back to lean, and we're leaning onto one leg to move the other leg. And it's the children who are asymmetrical, who can't lean as well onto one leg than the other, who often have the difficulty walking. So we do not put jackets and CAFOs together generally. It's like standing in a jacket in a standing frame. The question is why the standing frame. You know, if you're in jackets and CAFOs in a standing frame, you're not standing in a standing frame. It's just holding you up. You may as well have a standing table if you're standing in CAFOs and a jacket in a standing frame. But Lycra, we're not convinced about. Yes, it moves more easily, but on the other hand, it's not got a tummy hole. There is no such thing as a tummy hole in Lycra. Some of the kids find it too hot and too restrictive. Going to the loo in a Lycra suit can be difficult depending on age and toileting. And it certainly will not help with more than a very, very mild spinal curve. If you've got a mild spinal curve, mild spinal asymmetry, you tend to sit more, littlies tend to sit more on one cheek than the other, fine. You may find that it helps you stabilize. I'll never forget, there was a young lady in Glasgow whose parents were convinced the Lycra did her some good. She still had scoliosis surgery at the same age she would have done in a jacket, so it didn't help that much. But what they did say is she could sing louder while she was wearing it. So that was one effect that the Lycra had. It must have helped her respiratory because she could sing louder. But generally you can't get a tummy hole. The other thing is, of course, you can't get a gastrostomy hole either in Lycra. I'm sure Job Skin or whoever make them, DMO, could possibly sew a hole to let a gastrostomy through, but I've never seen one as yet. But I do know a young lady who's getting a Lycra suit. Fine, if that's really what you want. I'm not convinced it's going to do as much as a good, well-fitting jacket.
Okay, we've got another question saying, what do you think about a spinal jacket plus a chin bar?
The question is why? Why do you need a chin bar? Now, one of the very first questions you asked, Marnie, is does wearing a spinal jacket make you weaker? And I don't believe it does, but I do believe that if you are in a chin bar or a collar the whole time, yes, it does nothing for your head. We recommend collars in 3 situations: traveling, in fatigue, particularly at school, and if the child is very unstable. But on the whole, we do not recommend collars. We think that good seating, good spinal jackets, but particularly good seating should be enough. The chin bar usually suggests head instability. And if you're that unstable, is your seating correct? Are you in the right orthosis? I think that needs a lot of looking at. Now, I know in Italy, if you've ever listened to Chiara Mastella, she has some of the SMA ones in a full harness system for the head and actually holds them up, which allows them to move. But that's really very much for the weakest children or the ones who very much tend to tip to one side. Now, if you are getting stuck to one side, and we have had children recently who are getting this tight neck, this torticollis, but good stretching, good management, good seating for all of them has helped, and a good jacket particularly.
Okay.
Now, I'm not sure about a chin bar. We do recommend collars for traveling for the children who lose their head, particularly if there's just one parent around. It is almost impossible to drive a child when you're on your own if their head falls forward. So I know that for definite, if there's anything that can be done to help to make traveling safer, more comfortable and easier, then that certainly is a time when a chin bar or a collar would be a useful adjunct.
Okay, last question and then we'll move on to the next bit is, do you recommend self-propelled manual wheelchairs for shoulder strength?
You can get away with not doing an awful lot of shoulder, but yes, we do like the kids who can push, and that's why we like the dynamic standers. So very often we will say that if a child's in a standing frame who could push, then get them in a dynamic stander. And those are the standing frames with the big wheels, and so that they can push themselves while they're standing up. And we always recommend the children who can stand in a stander without the supine support. That's the ones where you start off lying and come to standing so that you're basically leaning your back against. It's almost like a bed that stands up. That's a supine stander. And that's for the weaker children, but for the stronger children, the type 2s, they should all be in a dynamic stander so that they're mobile and can push. If the children can push a manual wheelchair, absolutely yes, it's good arm exercise. Not necessarily shoulder girdle, because you can actually get away with not doing very much with your shoulders, that you're not doing very far, but yes. And also, it depends on the wheelchair. It is very hard to push a bog standard little boxy heavyweight wheelchair. To push a wheelchair effectively, it really should be a lightweight sports style. And when we say sports style, those are the wheels that are slightly angled instead of the little boxy things with the wheels straight up. So the angled wheels, the lightweight wheelchairs are much, much easier to push than the sort of bog standard square little things that you see sometimes. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's it for questions at the moment.
Okay, so we're going to go back to where we were. I hope. Okay, I'm just going to go back a couple of slides because I think somebody was asking about shoulder blades. And this is the sort of thing that you see. Once you start getting a curve, then the shoulder blade on the side of the curve very often will stick up more than the other one. It will not only stick up more, but it will stick out more. And what you'll see is that that one tends to stick away from the chest more. And that is the fault of the curve, and there is very little we can do. But what we want to do, if possible, is upper body weight bearing. Now, I know this is one of those difficult positions in SMA. If you don't have the head control, I hate this. I do not insist the children go over wedges, but what we use a lot of is the balls and peanuts, because it's a much easier way of getting weight bearing through the arms. Now, there's a lot of ways to do upper body weight bearing, and adults, you can do this as well. Get yourself to a wall and push, get yourself pushing downwards. You can push on a table, you can roll onto your side and push up, even rolling pushes. But if you're on your side, you can push yourself backwards and forwards. So weight bearing through your arms, pushing through your arms, really pushing down, using that shoulder girdle, using your triceps. This is what we're using to straighten those arms. You're using your triceps muscle here, but that attaches to the trunk as well. This is a really important one. Wall press ups, just go to a wall and push yourself, come forwards, push yourself back. So we really like the balls. You can be at a much easier angle for the head control. You don't have to be forwards like this. and pull your head up. But upper body weight bearing, however you can do it, is really important. But we want the children, and that's why we advocate the balls for the littlies. This is really, really difficult. Better for the type 2s, helps to lift up the trunk initially. Not sure what this one's doing. It looks like this child doesn't need to be doing anything but going off and crawling around. This helps to raise the trunk, but you don't need to use the wedge if you're prepared to hold the child, or it can be a roll or a ball. Now, one of the things people forget is to stretch the shoulders, to stretch the shoulder girdle. Very often we talk about the arms, we talk about lifting the arm up, but we actually forget about stretching the shoulder girdle, and that is stretching the shoulder blades. That one that all the exercise people love. And again, your carers can do it, or you can help your children do it. You can make it into games, stretching across your body. That helps to, I've lost my mouse, here it is. Stretching your shoulder blade, pulls your shoulder blades apart and stretches those muscles. Stretching over the back, stretches your shoulder blades. Putting your hand behind your back, low down and looking in the opposite direction, stretches your trapezius. Good stretch for that. Hands behind your head, stretches all the muscles up under your arms. And stretching backwards stretches your collarbone, stretch your pecs, and helps you stretch. Now, people forget to stretch their shoulder girdle. And it's really a shame that in all these stretches, adults particularly get those shoulder blades moving. And if you've had spinal surgery, even more important, if you're on Spinraza, you're starting risdiplam, think about doing these stretches, mobilize your shoulder blades, because the more you mobilize your shoulder blades, the better your arms are going to work. This is on automatic, I'm afraid, and I'm not sure how to switch it off. Anyway, don't forget those shoulder girdle stretches. Okay, now this is a really lovely stretch. If you can, if you've got a bed that you can get in behind, we do it on the plinths at work. If you're getting a lot of neck pain, if you're one of these who's got the shoulder blades up around their ear holes, get behind so that the person doing the stretching is here. And what you're doing is basically putting your hands on the top of the shoulders and pushing, and the person is reaching down towards their knees. Push down on those shoulder blades, both hands together. It's never going to be painful. You're never going to do any damage, but it's such a nice stretch for the shoulder girdles. Depression, I know it's a strange word, pushing into depression. Not what you'd normally want to do, but that's what it's called. And you're pushing those shoulder blades down so the arms are stretching down towards the knees. Lovely, lovely, relaxing stretch for the neck and shoulder girdle. But we need exercises that stretch the shoulder girdle, reaching upwards, reaching downwards. All this reaching is stretching around that shoulder girdle, getting it mobilized. If you can't do it in this position, do it in this position. Reach upwards, do it lying on your back so that all of your body is stable and all you're doing is reaching your arm. And if you can't get your arm up there, get somebody to hold your arm and you reach with your arm being held. And that's one that everybody can do. Hold the arm, get somebody to hold your arm there, but reach. And that's your pecs, serratus anterior, and that is a very, very easy exercise. Most people don't realize that they can even do that until they try, because a lot of people can't get their arm into that position. And as I say, once it's there, you can stretch upwards. So a lot of exercise lying on your back, a lot of exercise pushing downwards, reaching down towards your knees, really important one. Taking weights, wrist weights, weights down towards your knees, sliding them down. If your bed covers are getting in the way, if the plinth's getting in the way, have something slidey. Have a big hefty piece of cardboard stuck under your bum that slides down. Use a tray, use whatever to get those arms stretching down, get that shoulder girdle stretching, reaching, if you can't do it in sitting or even standing in a standing frame. So we've shown these ones before for upper trunk. All these exercises get the upper trunk moving, but if the upper trunk is moving, then the shoulder girdle's moving as well. You can't move your upper trunk, you can't move your arms without moving your shoulder girdle. So there's a lot of stuff here A lot of stuff that you're doing, backwards, forwards, up and down, flapping, rolling in and out. People forget these movements, the rotation movements, up and down movements, really important movements to help your arms to function. Therapy bands, great. You can't complain that you can't do anything, that there's no exercises you can do. Not only are you getting stretch and reach, you're getting lean. So you can do leaning, you can pull backwards, get out of your wheelchair, sometimes sit on your bed, get your arms back behind you, get those elbows back behind you, because you are exercising that part of triceps as well, exercising the back of deltoid, which helps you stabilize those shoulder blades. All these exercises that we love and we've shown before. Boxing is a brilliant exercise because you can do it on a level, you can do it lying down, pushing upwards, you can do it in lots of directions. You don't have to have the biggest boxing gloves in the world. You can do it just with a pair of gloves. But it is a nice exercise. But don't forget, you can do these things lying on your back. Don't think you always have to do them sitting up. If they're easier when you're lying down, do them lying down. And the swimming pools are opening up, people, and you will not get better exercise for your arms than swimming. You can do it on your back. Some people will do it on their front. But if you're doing it on your back, well, I was talking to somebody only yesterday about the fact that they do a lot of pulling in, lots and lots of pulling in. Well, don't forget this out. Don't forget out. It's a really important one not to forget out. And again, you can flap and flap in and out of the water to get the rotation as well. You can use the resistance gloves. You can put armbands on. You can pull your arms down in the water, which are really lovely, either with the resistance gloves or with weights. Some people find those resistance gloves quite difficult to get on. Just use an armband blown up around your wrist. Great for doing exercises pulling down. You can do it in a sitting position. Pull your arms in the water. Really nice to get your shoulder girdle down. So that's about it. We can do lots and lots of work on shoulders, but the really important thing that we've got to think about is that it's not just about arms. It's not just about reach. Reach is only going to be an issue when you have weakness. The weakness is the weight of your arms is too much for your shoulders to lift. Same we have with the legs. The legs themselves may be strong, but if the hip muscles can't lift them up, that's where you've got the problems. We need to work around the shoulders. Everybody thinks about the elbows. You think about some of this work here, shoulder girdle, shoulder exercises. But as I say, you can do it in lying. Stop thinking that all the exercises that you do have to be sitting up. You can do them lying down, reaching upwards, reaching down towards your knees, reaching across you. That's part of rolling. So much work you can do in different positions. So remember that reach is restricted as much by lean as it is by weakness around the shoulder girdle. So it's not a case of a jacket restricting you. As I say, your spinal surgery will restrict you even more. If your shoulders are weak, even when you lean, you're not going to get as far as if we try and get these shoulder girdles built up. It's hard because the weight of your arms is tough on your shoulders. It is a flexible, mobile joint. Some people do have subluxing shoulders, very loose shoulders that are very, very hard to stabilize. But if you don't work on them, you're not going to get anywhere. And if you're starting these drugs, then now is the time to get in and get these exercises done. If you need any help, we've got plenty of exercise suggestions. There are plenty of videos, Pilates style exercises. You don't have to use a hefty ball. You can use balloons. The big thing about COVID has been we can't blow bubbles at the moment, so we haven't been able to do lots of bubble work with the kids, but you can do it. There is a lot of stuff. Just use your imagination, get your hands moving, get your arms moving. Lots of work where the children have to stabilize. So they've got their arms up and then they're using the hands in this position. Even if you need to start with your arms supported at this level, start here, get those shoulders working, get them here instead of always down here or up here. Get those shoulders down, reach down to your sides, really reach, get stretched here. But it means neck control, head control, shoulder and trunk control. Put it all together. And if it doesn't work, lie down and do your exercises. Marnie, any more questions?
Yeah, we've got a couple. Is 11-month-old type 1 treated with gene therapy at 5 months old, then is improving greatly, can sit unsupported up to 5 minutes, then has good head control. Should we start using the standard, and what age is best? And what's the maximum age to start using? Also thinks we should not use it before 18 months old in order not to force milestones, which could lead to a back curve.
Rubbish. If a normal child stands at 9 to 12 months, my feeling is every child should stand at 9 to 12 months. I have no issue with them standing at 11 months. If you want to develop hip joints, get on those legs. The longer you leave it, the shallower your hips are going to be, the more likely they are to fall out. She is doing well on Spinraza, get her standing up. If her head is that good and she's sitting, I wouldn't even have her in a standing frame. Those of you who know us and love us at GOS know we would put her in gaiters for starters. If she can manage in gaiters, she goes into CAFOs. Get those hip joints weight bearing. And at that point, there is nothing to stop a child who is sitting from standing. And we have a few who aren't sitting standing and actually can stand better often than they can sit, because your hamstrings can work more effectively in standing than they can in sitting. If you have good head control and some trunk and pelvis control, even if you're not sitting brilliantly, sometimes standing is the best thing you can do. If you want some hip joints, get standing. Don't leave it till they're 18 months. Don't know where that came from, but it's not a figure we would ever use. 9 months, 11 months, if they've got the stability to sit, they should be on 2 feet. Nothing to do with what we were talking about today at all, but there we go.
So just a question, because you showed some exercises on the PowerPoint. If someone's lost the ability to do that in terms of to feed themselves, to take a drink, from either wearing a jacket or having spinal surgery, what exercises would you recommend to get that back? Well,
one of the things that people don't realize is there are 2 movements in the arm. There are biceps. Now, this is your biceps, this chunky muscle at the front, and it's often in neuromuscular disorders, and particularly SMA, weaker than you think. Everybody thinks you can do this. So if you try and put your hand to your shoulder, what will often happen is your hand will turn over. So instead of bringing your hand up this way, you will end up bringing it that way. And the reason that happens is that that is a different muscle, and that is this one here, not this one here, but this one here at the side of your arm, and that one bends your arm and twists it. But if you are straight and you do that movement, it doesn't bring your hand up high enough. If you can use your biceps, you will get your hand to your mouth. If you use brachioradialis, which is the stronger muscle, you end up there, not there. This is biceps. This is brachioradialis. It misses your mouth. And that is why a lot of people have difficulty, because they're not exercising the right muscle or they're not using the right muscle. So what we need to do is switch on biceps and get a combination of biceps and brachioradialis. Now you will see that as I do that with brachioradialis, I need to lift my elbow. I cannot use brachioradialis to get to my mouth without lifting my elbow up. I can use biceps to get to my mouth, but biceps is weak. So I do that. So this is where you need to know what muscles are working and what you need to do. If that is my strong muscle, it's not going to reach my mouth. I have to be able to lift my arm. So you've got one of 2 choices. You start working trying to get biceps working, or you have to use your shoulder to lift your elbow to get your brachioradialis to get to your mouth. And this is where your anatomy and your knowledge of muscles working is so important in SMA. And so many physios do not know which muscles are weak and which muscles are working, so aren't exercising the right muscles. Simple as that.
Okay, that's great. I think as far as I can tell, that's it for questions. If I have missed any, I do apologise. Please PM them to the page. And
Okay.
I'll on to Marion.
So basically what we're saying is that you've got to exercise your shoulder girdle as well as your arms. You need to get weight bearing. You can do that just by leaning on the table in front of you. You can do press ups down to the table. You can do wall press ups. You can do press downs lying on the bed. You can push your elbows into the bed. You can roll and push yourself backwards so you can get carers to help you if you're an adult. So getting rolling back from your side back onto your back, an important push. And these are the things that parents should be encouraging. I'm sure there isn't an adult anywhere who particularly wants to go over a peanut or a therapy ball. You've got to be a little bit crazy to think that that would be an option, but there are certainly things that you can do. And what you can do with a peanut is have it on your knee and roll over it and use it, or a therapy roll, one of the little Pilates style roll, and roll it forwards and backwards on the table in front of you. Get those arms moving. You can roll over these rolls and push on the table. Don't stop thinking that there are restrictions just because you don't have the equipment or you don't have the therapy bands, or you know, you've got to think. And this is why I'm trying to teach you anatomy. This is why I'm trying to teach you movements, so you have an idea of what you want to achieve. And then your table, your kitchen table or your workbench or your desk is as good as anything to do your exercise. Get your rolling pin out, go and beat up a bit of pastry, whatever you want to do. There are so many things that you can think of that will get these shoulders moving. Okay.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Right, if anybody wants to shout, they're welcome. They can catch me on the TreatSMA site. I think a lot of people know where I am, but we can send out exercise programs. We need to know where you're stuck. Obviously, contractures around the shoulder girdle, people ignore them. They're not stretching their shoulder girdle. If you're stuck solid and your shoulder blades don't move, there's not a long way you can go. So start getting those shoulder girdle stretches. And actually, you'll find they're quite comfortable. Don't let them get painful. You will find some knotty muscles in there, but get working on those shoulder stretches. They'll be on the webinar. So those pictures of the different stretches are in there. So no excuses, people.
Could you possibly send that image across and then I can put it on the actual pages so they're up there as well?
Yeah, well, I sent you the PowerPoint.
Oh, yeah, you did. I'll pull it off.
It was a long time ago, Marnie. It was about
2 hours ago. I've done
Thanks, Billy, Marnie. Okay, next time, people, in a couple of weeks' time, we are talking to the non-ambulant SMA3s. Does not mean the rest of you can't listen, but we're talking to the non-ambulant SMA3s who are now getting nusinersen, not risdiplam, and I know there will be a lot of you adults who are type 3 who may take a long time to get nusinersen, who may not want nusinersen and may be waiting for oral drugs or other drugs to come along. I can understand anybody not wanting a series of lumbar punctures and whatever, but you know, maybe you should speak to people who are already having it and find out what it's like. There are type 3s, obviously, who lost ambulation young, who will have spinal surgery and may not be suitable for nusinersen, but we are generally talking to the non-ambulant 3s about what you should be doing to make the most of nusinersen. But that doesn't mean to say that your good type 2s and everybody else won't find something in there for them too. Okay, thanks a million as ever, Marnie.
Thank you. See you later.
Thanks a lot. Bye.